Hello and welcome. Voted in on a wave of optimism, promising hope and change. US President Barack Obama did a good job of talking the talk, but is he failing to walk the walk? American voters go to the polls on Tuesday, and although President Obama is not on the ballot, the election is widely seen to be a test of his popularity, and many of those who chanted, "Yes, we can," may now be thinking, "No, he hasn't." Progressives say he backed Wall Street at the expense of the middle class with the bank bailouts, and that he compromised too much on healthcare reform. Conservatives argue that his policies have gone too far and accuse him of socialism. Outside the US, critics claim nothing has really changed since George W. Bush and point to the troop surge in Afghanistan and failure to close the prison at Guantanamo. So today we ask, is it too early to judge President Obama, or is he really more of the same? Join our conversation with your questions and comments by sending an SMS or an email, and we also welcome your phone calls on the show. Well, one world-renowned intellectual says that the only thing that has changed the new administration is the mood music. Joining me today from London is writer, journalist and filmmaker Tariq Ali. He's just published The Obama Syndrome: Surrender at Home, War Abroad. Tariq Ali, great to have you finally on the show.
Very good to be with you, Riz. Important times in the States at the moment.
For sure, of course. And I want to try and go through some of the issues you raised in your new book. I want to ask you first, in that book, you seem to come down pretty hard on Barack Obama. And you say that you wrote it because there's so much commentary about him right now that you wanted to produce a hard-headed, realistic account of who the guy is, but also a critique of the people who say that everything he's doing is so radical. What do you believe to be the biggest thing that people are getting wrong about the president?
Well, I think the people on the right and some of the Tea Party crowd are living in cuckoo land. I mean, they have no idea what's going on in their own country if they think Obama's a socialist. I mean, there's not any trace or evidence of that at all. And the assaults on him by Glenn Beck and Fox TV commentators are way off the mark. It's essentially what happens whenever you have a Democrat president. It doesn't matter who it is. A lot of people come out of the woodwork and begin to say that this Democrat president is A, B, C. It happened with Kennedy, it happened with Lyndon Johnson, it happened with Clinton, it happened with Carter, and it's now happening with Barack Obama. So we shouldn't be too surprised. That the real thing is this, Riz, that if they lose a lot tomorrow, if they lose control of the Senate and the House, the reason for that will not be that a lot of Democrats are going and voting for the other side. It'll be because a lot of his supporters are staying at home. And that is the important question. Why are they staying at home?
Well, of course, this election has shown the extent of division within the US, the public in the US. And of course, that opinion is divided overseas. What makes your take on him any more accurate or incisive?
Well, I have been following him closely. You know, I have no axe to grind. We took him at his word. And then when he came into office, admittedly at a time when the United States was experiencing the most appalling economic crisis since 1929, and stern measures were needed. And he went along with the Bush bailouts. On foreign policy, to be honest, one didn't expect too much because he had said in his campaigning that he was going to escalate the war in Afghanistan, that there were more troops were going to be sent, that he was going to escalate the war in Pakistan, and he criticized Bush from the right for not paying too much attention to that part of the world and being too obsessed with Iraq. And that he has done. The only promise he has sort of kept is to send more troops to Afghanistan, and the result has been disastrous, both in Afghanistan and in Pakistan, as we see.
Right. Actually, to quote your book, you say on that issue of foreign policy, from Palestine through Iraq to Iran, Obama has acted as just another steward of the American empire, pursuing the same aims as his predecessors, with the same means, but with a more emollient rhetoric. Now, in Afghanistan, he's gone further, widening the front of imperial aggression with a major escalation of violence, both technological and territorial. But what is he to do? I mean, is it simply to pull out? Wouldn't that simply have everyone there saying, you created the mess, now you're dropping it in our laps?
But that is what imperial powers always do. To expect them to transform a country for the better is to have too many illusions. They never do that unless there's absolutely some need for them to do it. They did it after the Second World War because there was a big rival in the offing. Though it was a weak rival, they thought it was stronger than it was, the Soviet Union and the communist world. So in order to fight that world, they had to rebuild Germany, Japan, parts of devastated Europe, which they did via the Marshall Plan. But now they don't behave like that. If you look at what's happened in Iraq, it's horrific. Over 1 million people killed, dead, 5 million refugees, the country's social infrastructure destroyed, 5 million orphans in that country. What is happening in Iran is proceeding along the same route. They never rebuild, they destroy. And so they should have taken seriously, as some of Obama's supporters were advising him to do, even before he became president, is to develop an exit strategy. How to get out of there and leave behind a stable country. Yeah. And this they never paid any serious attention to. It was more troops, more drone attacks on Pakistan. I mean, the figures are quite shocking that in his 2 years in office, Obama has had more drone attacks, authorized more drone attacks in Pakistan than Bush did in his entire 8 years. So that is why on this particular issue, he's gone way beyond the previous administration.
Well, on the issue of Afghanistan, we had an email, if I may put to you, that came in from Chile, from Fernando Perez, who says, Gorbachev said that a NATO victory is impossible in Afghanistan and the only way out is via a political solution. Gorbachev should know he was the one who ordered the withdrawal of Soviet troops. What do you think? Now, I know you're not a big fan of the administration current administration of Afghanistan, so who would lead?
Well, look, I think essentially what has to happen is this. I mean, Gorbachev is right, and he did have the courage to pull Soviet troops out of Afghanistan. And what Gorbachev didn't say, but the Russians at that time appealed to the Pakistan government to give the regime they were leaving behind a chance, not to topple it, because they said, once you topple that government, there will be mayhem. You will not be able to control the situation, and that's exactly what happened. Now, given what the situation in Afghanistan is now, I think the key players in the region, Iran, Russia, Pakistan, and China, have to be involved to provide some sort of administration through their people who they work with. In the case of Pakistan, the single most important organization in the country, in the Pashtun areas and in the country, which is the Taliban or the Neo-Taliban. In the case of Russia, remnants of the Northern Alliance. In the case of Iran, the groups based in Herat, who have been running it in Western Afghanistan. If these countries, regional countries, can agree on a coalition government and the Chinese agree to fund a national reconstruction plan for Afghanistan, then there is some hope. But I think that will only happen when the United States and its satellites in Afghanistan decide that the time has come to get out and allow the regional powers to handle the situation.
Going across issues of foreign policy here, the Bush administration said that in the last 60 years, the U.S. had chosen stability over democracy in the Middle East, and it chose democracy and got Hamas, which of course it wasn't happy with. But at least the Obama administration seems to be trying to push something with more players involved. What's your assessment on the way at least Barack Obama has tried to engage with the Middle East?
Well, look, I don't think he's changed anything. I mean, it's fine words. You know, the Cairo speech, Assalamu alaikum, and Arabs get excited. But basically nothing much has changed. As far as the central question is concerned, which is the dispute between the Israelis and the Palestinians, the Obama administration actually has made more concessions to the Israelis. They have not been able to stop the building of settlements. They have permitted Netanyahu to resume the building of settlements, and by God, the speed with which they are being built now has astonished everyone. So in terms of bringing Israel to heel, or even putting and exerting some pressure on it, they have failed completely. At the same time, they've got a technocrat who they support as Prime Minister of Palestine, unelected on the West Bank, Salah, who does their bidding, who's a great favorite with Mossad and the Israelis, and they're trying to crush the PLO even further, get it on its knees and say, you just do what we want. And what they want is for the PLO basically to capitulate even more than it has already done to what the Israelis demand. Hamas they want to completely isolate in Gaza, and they refuse to recognize the Hamas election victory. So what price democracy? And the situation in Palestine is miserable. People are depressed, people are upset, because they feel now that they have been defeated, and defeated not so much by their enemies, but defeated by their own leaders. And that is creating a very grim situation.
Well, let me, lots more questions for you, Tariq Ali. We're going to take a short break here. Now, when we return, how has Barack Obama fared when it comes to the US economy? More of our discussion in just a moment. Welcome back. Tuesday's midterm election in the US has been watched more closely than ever because it's seen as a referendum on President Barack Obama and his policies. How's he faring? Well, we're getting the perspective of writer and filmmaker Tariq Ali, who's joining us from London. His latest book, The Obama Syndrome, offers a strong critique of the Obama administration's policies, both at home and abroad. And we've got a caller on the line from Norway. John, thanks for being with us. What would you like to ask?
Thank you.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah. My, what I want to say is that, there's no person that is going to be the world president today that everybody is going to like. For me, I feel like what Obama is doing, he's not doing bad. I'm just pleading that the world should give him chance.
Okay, John, what I'll do is, John, I'm going to pick up on that point and get an email actually we had from a viewer, Gedeon Laguesse, who wrote in as well, saying, given the problems Obama inherited, I don't think he can solve them all in 2 years or change decades of US policies. The change must come from the public rather than the government. And I wonder, Tariq Ali, is it too early to judge Obama? 2 years is not that long, really, when you consider how much he has on his plate.
No. But the first year of a president in office is a pretty decisive year. And that's when you get a glimpse of the person, you get an idea of what policies are being pursued. And that is the time when the president's popularity is at its peak and he can more or less get through whatever he wants, especially in an unusual situation where you have a majority of Democrats in both House and Senate. Now, that is going to be unlikely in the next term. So Obama can say what he wants, and he can blame it onto this fact that he's lost a majority. But one reason he's going to lose the majority is because he hasn't utilized it to push through what was needed. But the other thing is right. It would help if there was massive pressure from the grassroots. This pressure exists, but it hasn't been mobilized, except by people on the populist right and libertarians. And even on their side, actually, if you look at the size of the Tea Party town hall meetings, they were very tiny. Obama supporters say that they have 13 million supporters, online supporters. Well, why didn't they mobilize them? Why wasn't there a million-strong march of people coming and saying we want a single-payer system for the health service, we don't want to pour money down the insurance companies as we've been doing for years? There was no mobilization at all, and one reason for that is that the mood of the people who elected Obama has been confiscated by the administration.
Okay, well, here we had a question from a viewer, if I may put this to you, from Frazzy Bruce, who wrote in saying, do you think Obama is actually trying to bring about progressive change? Between the continuation of 2 wars and providing no real oversight on the bank bailouts, he seems to remain on the side of corporate America. But I wonder, with the manacles of political office, with the issue of the opposition being so vocal, with the issue of the lobbies being so powerful for big business and various interest groups, can a president really chart a different course?
Well, it's a question of whether they really want to or not. I think what has emerged is that Obama is a weak president. He changes his mind all the time. He doesn't know what he really wants apart from power. And increasingly, he appears to be a typical machine politician from a city, Chicago, which specializes in producing them. So it's not simply what he can't do, it's what he wants to do. And there is no evidence that he wants to do what many of us would like, or many of his own supporters in the United States would like. If we say that it is not possible for anyone from either political party to bring about any change whatsoever, then this puts a very big question mark on American democracy itself. And the great political scientist at Princeton, Sheldon Wolin, has written a book called Democracy, Inc., saying that democracy itself now has become corporatized. And if that is the case, then I think you will see votes going further and further down, more and more people becoming alienated from politics, especially the young generations. Obama mobilized them and promised them something. But in reality, they've got very little, if anything.
Well, on the issue of healthcare, let's just listen to how President Barack Obama defends himself when he appeared on The Daily Show in the US on that issue, and how he talks about people focusing on the smaller stuff and not the big successes.
This is what I think most people would say is as significant a piece of legislation as we've seen in this country's history. And the notion that, but what happens is, what happens is it gets discounted because the presumption is, well, we didn't get 100% of what we wanted. We got 90% of what we wanted, so let's focus on the 10% we didn't get as opposed to the 90% that we did.
Isn't that a valid point, that people do tend to focus on a small negative and not on the larger achievements when it comes to making judgments?
But look, we don't know what these achievements will be, Riz. They won't come into effect till 2014. Secondly, what has happened, we do know, is that the insurance companies are going to be kept in place. They're going to become even more powerful, and everything is going to be done via them. I mean, it is grotesque and shocking that the United States spends more money on health than any European country and has an appalling health service system. And all the doctors I've spoken to, and some nurses do, in the United States, have absolutely no confidence that this system is going to make it better, if indeed it lasts.
Let me put an email to you we got from London in the UK, where Fernando Pizarro wrote in saying, "Given the power of the right-wing media in the US, your voice of dissent will always be important. But if you were in Obama's position, what would you do?"
I would do what many of the South American leaders have done. I mean, in virtually all the South American countries where there is change, whether it's Ecuador, whether it's Bolivia, whether it's Venezuela, Paraguay, Brazil, in most cases, 95 to 99% of the media was against them, campaigning against them, and in a much, much more vicious way than Fox is against Obama, if you can believe that. And yet they mobilized, they fought for their ideas, they won people over to their ideas, they got elected, and when they got elected, they said, we have a mandate for change, and this is what we're going to do. So there is an example just south of the border.
It's interesting, I had President Jimmy Carter on this show just a few days ago, and he said actually if one of the houses was to fall to the Republicans in the midterm election, that it might actually loosen things up, that by virtue of the fact that President Obama and the Democrats control the situation in DC, the Republicans have no role except to just block everything and oppose everything and basically be difficult. Perhaps with the responsibility of having to make decisions with a bit of power, there may be some change. What's your view on that?
Well, it's possible, but you know, it depends what is being put to them. So far, many of the Tea Party types have opposed the bailouts to Wall Street. That has annoyed them. And Obama, in his interview with Jan Wenner and Rolling Stone, admitted that there were different currents in the Tea Party, and some of them were very upset about the bailouts. So, and you know, some Republicans and one or two Democrats did oppose the bailouts. So, I'm not 100% sure that Jimmy Carter is right. And actually, I'm glad you had him on the show, because he too tried to push through a much, much better health bill. Even Nixon had a health bill proposal on the table, which was way more radical than anything Obama's managed to get through. So he should know what the score is, that the corporations now and the lobby system is incredibly powerful. I mean, you have a situation where both Democrats and Republicans, this is not just isolated to in one party, actually get money from lobbyists, work with them quite openly, they're in and out. I mean, the woman who wrote the health bill for Obama worked for one of the big pharmaceutical people and was herself formerly involved with insurance companies. So these are the people who even draft the bills. So where is this country going to go like this unless you have a really strong president who says enough's enough? And Obama, however much people would have liked him to be, isn't that president.
I have basically 20 seconds. Do you see anyone being a better alternative to Barack Obama?
But you know, this is always the question. There is no alternative to these policies. I prefer not to concentrate so much on personalities, but on policies. You have to judge a politician not by what he says, by what he does.
Okay.
And on that level, there is more continuity with Bush than anything else.
Well, Tariq Ali, I thank you so much for your time. Good to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us with your questions. Remember, you can see a podcast of the show on iTunes, where we're featuring a discussion on the backlash against immigrants in Europe, and ask, what's the future of multiculturalism in the face of Europe's rising political right? On the next show, it's election day for the midterms in the US, and both the left and right are angry, so which way will the voters turn, if they turn out at all? We'll talk to activists on both sides and ask them what they really want and how they plan to get it. Make sure you tune for that, and from me and the team, we'll see you next time.